Hi, everyone. While we're waiting for a few more people to attend, feel free to put in the chat where you're calling in from. We have Albany, New York, in Pennsylvania. Oh, looks like we're covering most of the country. All right, maybe we should get started. It's a couple minutes after 1. Good afternoon. My name is Donna Holmes. I'm the Managing Director of Investor Relations at Iroquois Valley. And today we have invited our colleagues at OFRF, that stands for the Organic Farming Research Foundation, to provide an update on recent federal policy as it affects agriculture. But before we begin, a couple of administrative announcements. First, the webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on both OFRF's website as well as Iroquois Valley's website next week. The slides will be distributed to all the participants in the next several days. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please ask them by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer all questions following the presentation. Before I turn the mic over to OFRF, I'll give a short introduction of Iroquois Valley for anyone who may not be familiar with our company. Iroquois Valley is a finance company that provides capital to organic farmers across the U.S. through long-term leases and flexible mortgages. The company offers impact-driven investors the opportunity to help finance the transformation of the agricultural system by partnering with us and our farmers. Investments in Iroquois Valley support farmers who are improving the environment, growing more nutritious, chemical-free crops, and strengthening communities. REIT equity shares have delivered an annual return of 9%, providing our investors with an impactful and also a financially rewarding investment. If anybody has any questions or would like more information on Iroquois Valley, feel free to drop your email in the chat or your phone number, and we'll be in touch. But I think now I'm going to turn it over to Gordon and his team, and he will begin the presentation.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks Iroquois Valley to invite us and let us share some of our work, but also some of the updates of things happening down in DC. So I'm, like Donna said, I'm Gordon Merrick, the Policy Program Director for OFRF. I'm joined by Vinnie Trometter, who's our Policy Fellow, as well as Leah Lawson, who's our Development Director. And we're here to, give some federal policy updates on completed and pending actions, and we'll dive right in. So today we're gonna, do a quick introduction to who OFRF is, and then look at the legislative policy updates, some administrative policy updates, kind of our view of what the future holds for organic agriculture and also kind of discuss what we're doing about those actions. So if for people who aren't familiar with us, OFRF has been around since the early 90s, and our mission has stayed the same since the founding, which is really to foster the improvement and widespread adoption of organic farming systems. We see organic agriculture as the leading form of agriculture. As Donna, outlined, it helps develop healthy and resilient people, ecosystems, and ultimately economies as well. There's some great research out there to really back all of this up as well. So happy to share that with anybody that's interested. So we try and work to that mission through three main avenues: advocacy work, which we'll be talking a little bit more about today, but our research work where we're funding on-farm, like farmer-led research trials. Historically, we've provided kind of seed capital for researchers to get their career started in organic, and we'll be able to share at least one of those stories earlier or later today, and kind of the marriage between that and our advocacy work. But really, we've recently taken a little bit of a different strategy to really try and have the farmers do the research with us as back-end support and providing some small amount of grant capital to really like facilitate that work. And then our education work, we're trying to take those academic research projects and articles and really translate that technical language into easy to understand and action-oriented resources that are all for free on our website. So we have soil health guides, we have farmer-led research, like how to do your research. We have a variety of materials that are free to access on our website. So please check it out, ofrf.org. But let's get into the meat of the discussion today. In terms of the completed and pending legislative actions, and that's actioned by Congress. We're going to review the reconciliation package that passed earlier this year, the rescission package that passed earlier this year, and then the ongoing debates and negotiations about the appropriations and farm bill processes, as well as a quick overview of the oversight actions that Congress has taken of this administration so far. So this is a lot of text, and I apologize, but there's a lot of stuff in this reconciliation package. And I think first and foremost, the biggest impact of this is the farm bill implications. Historically, farm bill is this nearly $1 trillion piece of legislation that is trying to have a coalition of the urban and the rural communities to try and come together to get this like large omnibus piece of legislation. It's actually really the only legislative vehicle that still tries to do this large kind of big tent type of legislating, and that was really thrown into question earlier this year because of this reconciliation package, because the lion's share of the farm bill is food assistance known as SNAP, as well as commodity programs like or crop insurance and direct kind of payment supports for price loss coverage. And instead of going through the general farm bill process, this reconciliation package legislated both of those two big buckets without that process and kind of without bipartisan support and bipartisan buy-in. That has caused some big kind of questions about the implications of the farm bill in the future that we'll discuss later. But overall, this reconciliation package is definitely a mixed bag when it comes to the impacts on agricultural programs. Like I said, the cutting SNAP by around $190 billion over the next 5 years is a significant impact to the food assistance programs that many Americans rely on. But then, we do see some kind of potential good things coming out of this as well, with the conservation programs seeing significant increases in budget. And that's a little bit of a like fudging of the numbers, where this increase was already there in the Inflation Reduction Act funding that was the reconciliation package that Biden passed in the previous administration. And really what this package does is brings that into the Farm Bill baseline. So it's not necessarily an increase to the existing budgets, but an increase to the starting point for Farm Bill negotiations in the future. But it is silent on the Conservation Reserve Program. And I apologize for the little bit of alphabet soup here. This is the Conservation Stewardship Program. This is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This is the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, and the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, I believe, and then CRP is the Conservation Reserve Program. And all of these are basically different ways to help support farmers across the country to adopt conservation practices that help improve their systems and really work to conserve natural resources, but also make the economics work out a lot better to be a better operation for all things considered. And then in other kind of avenues outside of the conservation space, we did see an increase for the funding for 1890 scholarships. 1890s are the historically Black colleges and universities across the country, primarily in the Southeast and West. That scholarship program went from $20 million to $60 million over the course of the reconciliation package, which expires in 2031. So that's a significant increase and has a potential for a really great support for getting more diverse individuals into this agricultural research world and just agricultural work in general. In terms of some research programming, the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, or SCRE, had their funding increased from 80 million to 175 million annually. That's a huge bump up, and just shows kind of the real need for research in this area. SCRE does do some funding for organic projects, but it is not a dedicated program. And the ranging for organic projects within SCRE, it ranges year to year, but can be as high as 15 to 20%, or as low as 5 to 10%. And that's all kind of considering that in the large marketplace, organic produce makes up about 15 or more than 15% of the total specialty crop sales, which is like produce and those things. But in terms of specific things for organic, one really bright spot of this reconciliation package is that it does increase the total funding for the Organic Production Market and Data Initiative. Ultimately, this is just trying to make sure that the organic marketplace has the financial and analytical tools to really understand what's happening in the market, so we can support where support is needed and highlight the successes and kind of the gaps in the market that need to be filled. This is just an important tool for investors to really understand where to invest and how to invest. And then another helpful thing is that this brought back the organic certification cost share program at $8 million a year through 2031. That isn't necessarily enough to cover the entire program because the popularity has grown in recent years. But it does mean that program exists because previously it was not included in the Farm Bill extension that happened last year. So it's kind of what is known as a stranded program within Farm Bill negotiations. And this inclusion in the reconciliation package brings it back for the foreseeable future, which ultimately is a pretty big win and help support especially smaller organic farmers, because that program can reimburse your certification up to $750 or 75% of that certification cost per scope. So if a farmer is growing crops, but also doing some packing and handling and those types of things, that means that they can qualify up to $1,500 to help cover both of those certifications, because those are both different scopes in terms of production and handling. So that's a completed legislative action, as you'll see kind of up here for the bolding. Just trying to do some visual keys for everybody. And moving on to the rescission package, there's a lot of R words in different packages right now, and reconciliation is kind of a very difficult process that requires a very it's just detailed and hard to get through, whereas rescission packages is a legislative vehicle that happens under the Impoundment Act, where the executive branch will send over a notification to the congressional branch or congressional offices and just says, we don't plan to spend this money and this is why. And then within 45 days, Congress has to pass that package that is sent over. And if it's not passed, then the executive branch has to spend the money. So we did see a rescission package pass in Congress earlier this year. Primarily, it was cutting funding for international development and assistance, as well as the Public Corporation for Broadcasting, which funds PBS and NPR and other kind of local radio stations and news stations. This isn't necessarily like impacting organic agriculture specifically, but I think importantly, it does highlight the willingness of Congress and the administration to change past budgets and past packages that have already passed, and really represents that source of uncertainty in farm bill and appropriation negotiations in the future, because the willingness to not necessarily go back on your word or go back on the deal, but to renegotiate a deal that's already been taken place is a thing that's going to impact things moving into the future. Now, moving into the more pending side of the legislative actions, in the appropriations process, generally this kicks off with the presidential budget request that gets sent over to appropriations committees, and they will kind of review this. It's largely a formality, but I think one thing to really pull out of that presidential budget request that came through this year is the severity of the cuts that this administration really wants to do, especially in the agricultural research realm. They suggested zeroing out what's known as Hatch or capacity grant funding for universities to continue operating their agricultural research programs. They've just had a lot of very alarming totals, but on the congressional side, in both the Senate and the House, the bills don't necessarily reflect the numbers that were sent over from the presidential budget request in large part. You'll see some aspects that there were some of those priorities brought over, but in terms of what's going on in the Senate and the House, on the Senate side, their bill passed out of the committee unanimously and then passed on the floor in a bipartisan manner, and largely it maintains the status quo. It keeps funding flat. It maybe cuts a little things here and there, but by and large, it's just continuing what has been happening. And then on the House side, it's a little bit different in that it does make some funding cuts and changes, but it largely maintains that status quo. But because of some of those priorities and changes made, it did pass out of the subcommittee and full appropriations committees on the House side, purely on partisan lines. So that kind of House still needs to pass one on the floor to bring that to conference committee. And then the conference committee, they'll try and kind of hash out the differences between the Senate version and the House version and make one unified version. And then that will be brought back to both the Senate and the House and have to be passed. If you want a more detailed kind of discussion of the legislative processes and things like that, I strongly recommend you check out our Communicating with Legislators course. I talk at length about that and happy to kind of keep it there and we'll keep moving. And definitely encourage folks to ask questions as they're coming up. But in terms of the Farm Bill side and the pending legislative action, as we kind of discussed with the reconciliation and the rescission packages, that's going to impact forward-looking negotiations. And there's two pretty different worlds that the House of Representatives and the Senate is living in right now. In the House, Chairman G.T. Thompson has been really trying to emphasize the aggressive kind of nature and posture that they're trying to pass a farm bill. Hopefully, GT is hopeful to try and get that to pass by the end of the year, hopefully sometime in fall is kind of his discussion of things. And our understanding is that largely is going to, the starting point is going to be the House, was known as a mark, which was passed out of committee and on the floor last year in last Congress, and not really like change much that's within that bill that had a variety of things in it, but it's definitely still just a line in the sand and negotiation point, not necessarily kind of a final place on what the legislation will look like. Then on the Senate side, definitely much more patient posture. Timeline is likely going well into 2026. We don't even have text yet on the Senate side. We just have an outline and some policy priorities. So there isn't necessarily even the ability to really like push fast because Senate staff has told us they don't have finalized text. So there's no real vehicle to move that forward because the legislation isn't out yet. This kind of two different postures is, I think, emblematic of the two different chambers of Congress, and what the founders really wanted to emphasize is that the House is a bit more kind of aggressive and a bit more willing to put things out there and like really propose new and bold ideas, whereas the Senate is the cooling saucer is I believe the term that I think it was Thomas Jefferson coined, where they tried to take those ideas from the House and really think about them really critically, really try and figure out the impacts of those and move forward in that way. And that's also kind of a result of the majorities that you need. In the House, you need a simple majority to pass anything. In the Senate, you generally need a filibuster-proof majority, which is 60 votes. So that requires a lot more negotiation, a lot more kind of losing the word, kind of yeah, I'm at a loss for words right now, but I'm trying to walk back from positions and understand each other's positions much more because there is no supermajority in the Senate right now. It's actually a very thin majority. So for anything to pass from the Senate, it does need to be bipartisan first and foremost. And then in the oversight world, I have to sprinkle in a little humor here. I apologize for anyone really looking for a serious webinar, but there hasn't been a lot of oversight. And that's, one thing important to understand is that both Senate and the House right now are Republican controlled. And so this is a Republican trifecta of a government. And it's been abundantly clear that these majorities are not necessarily very willing to explore oversight in a public way. I mean, trying to have strong oversight letters or strong hearings or anything like that, but they were much more willing to try and use back channels, try and have conversations with congressional liaisons at USDA and other agencies and investigate impacts that way, but not necessarily drawing the attention of the administration is one thing that's definitely been taking place on the legislative point. Um, mm, Now moving over to the administrative side, we're going to quickly discuss the deferred resignation programs, both the first and the second round, the impacts of those, what's going on with the request for applications or request for proposals from USDA's research programming and competitive grant programming. What we're referring to is this national security memo that was released earlier this summer, July 8th, to really discuss and we'll get into it. And then two new pieces that have come out recently as well. This grant making oversight White House executive order and directive, and the USDA's reorganization plan that came out earlier this summer. So in terms of the deferred resignation programs, this is information that we have as of March 25 or March 2025, so earlier this year, probably a little bit higher in terms of DRPs and separations from agency workforce. But you can see here in terms of the research agencies, there's been significant impact. And this is just really going to slow down research and scientific development, as well as like delivery of research to farmers and other entrepreneurs that are really looking for information. And I did highlight the organic data and marketing program initiative, and that is largely operated by the National Agriculture Statistics Service, or NASS, and the Economic Research Service, which is ERS. You can see, upwards of 30% of the workforce has left those two agencies, which provide that data analysis and market information to investors, like the folks that Iroquois Valley works with. And not having strong data means economic risk is increased. That's just going to kind of impact growth trajectories and all of these other things. And along with this deferred resignation program, there have been about 2 to 8% staffing losses and other separations, either non-deferred resignations, so just people quitting, or people being let go for other reasons. And in terms of the National Organic Program in general, that's housed within the Agricultural Marketing Service. And that agency has been impacted by about a 10% staff loss due to the DRPs and other separations. But it's kind of hard to get the specific numbers of the NOP, the National Organic Program. But through some informal conversations with NOP staff, we've kind of surmised that the function of NOP that's been most impacted is actually the enforcement division, which is not great development as we continue to have the strengthening organic enforcement rules come through, the organic livestock and production standards be coming online, and a variety of other kind of work that just makes sure that we have strong, robust enforcement for this label and sector. So as you can see, some significant impacts from this deferred resignations as well as other separations, and that's resulting in administrative disruptions and some challenges really trying to get information from agencies in general, just because offices are unstaffed, emails aren't being checked because those individuals have left the USDA. And in terms of the request for application, fiscal year confusion, there's been a lot of confusion around that because the RFAs for fiscal year 25, which we're about to come to the end to at the end of this month, those were released at the end of last year. And then when this administration came in, they withdrew them all for administrative review to be in line with their priorities. That's not an alarming thing in of itself. It usually takes anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks to really do that review and reissue any RFA, but those RFAs have still not been released. And through some informal conversations with allies and partners, both within and without the agency, there will be no FY25 RFA for most research programs that have what is known as 2-year or no-year funding. Here's this 7 USC section 3315A is kind of the authority that USDA has to utilize competitive grant funding for more than the one fiscal year that it's been granted in or given to the agency from NIFA, or from Congress. Hopefully we'll see those funds move next year through like an expanded budget for the program, but that's still up in the air, and we'll see kind of how things roll out in the new year. We do expect there to be a FY26 RFA, but we're not sure when. Historically, that usually comes out, between October and November. We do know that NIFA is transitioning, or NIFA is the National Institute for Food and Agriculture. Sorry for a more alphabet soup, but they generally administer their RFAs in the fall, and they are moving to a new application system, and there are new trainings and things like that available, I believe, next week. So if you are an organization or an individual that has applied to grants in the past, I strongly suggest you look into that. And I believe it's the ERFA program. So check out some of those trainings. All in all, it's definitely a significant disruption. We've connected with researchers that really depend on this funding to facilitate their work in continuity. And that has led to some disruptions for their research. And again, more importantly, in my perspective, disruptions in delivering that research to farming and agricultural communities that really depend on it so they can improve their operations and keep things moving forward. So we'll see long-lasting impacts from this that we're just really starting to understand right now. And in terms of both completed and a pending administrative action, it's completed in that the memo has been released, but it's pending in that we're not sure how it will actually be implemented. So this July 8th memo was sent to all USDA research staff and research facilities. That's really barring non-citizens from a variety of activities, including the access to USDA funded and USDA co-located facilities and the research data that's associated with those. And functionally speaking, that's all land-grant university programs. They usually have ARS co-located facilities. They usually have USDA funding, either through competitive grants or, as I mentioned previously, that Hatch Act capacity funding that's really intended to facilitate the entire research infrastructure at the USDA. I think some of the biggest impacts will come from these other two, with the collaboration with USDA funded scientists and listing USDA funded scientists as co-authors. We already know of multiple PhD candidates that are not United States citizens that have been barred from submitting their theses and to have their work be challenged and have their degree be finished because they were utilizing USDA information and research data. They were partnering with USDA scientists, and they were aiming to have those scientists as co-authors. So now there's a lot of question about what this is going to mean for the research community at large in moving forward. And there have been, a lot of negative implications of this already. And I believe National Public Radio, NPR, did do a story about this a few weeks ago. But we've heard that, firing of non-citizens from ARS facilities that were postdocs or lab technicians with as little as 24 hours notice. So is a big disruption for the system, but even larger of a disruption for those individuals that really facilitated and made the system work. And this is a continually developing situation. We have looked at some of the rulemakings that USDA has come out with recently, specifically what's known as the application kit for the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, which is letting folks know that there will be a new requirement for listing non-citizen collaborators and other things. So it's definitely an ongoing and developing situation. We'll see what happens, but stay tuned because it's changing quickly. And something that is also rapidly developing, and we're really just trying to get an understanding of it, is this new executive order that's directing agencies with the grant-making programs like NIFA to change their grant-making policies to allow for a lot more discretion and control by the Office of Management and Budget, as well as other political appointees within those grant-making programs to alter or cancel grants for not being in line with agency priorities or the national interest. That's a really broad and really vague description of how to cancel an ongoing grant. And that's going to potentially have massive implications for the ability to conduct and research and, again, deliver that research to agricultural communities across the country. This is still very much a developing situation. We haven't seen any more information about the actual implementation of this executive order and directive, but as things develop, if you want to stay in tune, we'll definitely have that information available through our newsletter and other avenues. So yeah, feel free to subscribe, and we'll let you know as we know. And lastly, the pending administrative action. The USDA's reorganization plan was released on July 25th in a very brief memo that kind of discussed the reorganization and relocating of different USDA offices, which included closing the Beltsville Agricultural Research Station in Beltsville, Maryland, which has one of, if not the longest long-term study, comparative analysis study of organic and conventional agriculture. And that's a significant blow, right, to the industry at large, but also, again, the individuals that are conducting this work and doing some incredibly valuable pieces of research that will largely, quickly fall by the wayside because, it's very easy to stop these research programs, but it's really hard to, find a research plot that is capable of having 30 plus years of research being conducted on it and getting that long-term trend line, which is much more important in an agroecological system like organic agriculture than other kind of chemistry-led agricultural systems. And we do know that from the 2018 relocation of NIFA and ERS from DC to Kansas City, that there's going to be significant attrition that's associated with any relocation of USDA offices and programs and agencies. Um, as of earlier this year, at the start of the new year, both of those agencies actually hadn't fully recovered from that 2018 relocation. And as I kind of pointed out earlier through the DRP programs, is even more true now because upwards of 20 to or 10 to 30% of staff within those agencies have left. Um, and I think another important thing is kind of the intent behind this reorganization plan, or at least the stated intent, was to bring agricultural services and agricultural programs in the USDA back to rural communities and agricultural communities. I think that's a well-placed intent. I think that is something that is really powerful. But when you look at the previous actions of this administration as it relates to bringing people back to the office in DC and now trying to push them back out into agricultural communities, there isn't a lot of congruency across those. And then also, you know, over 95,000 out of the about 100,000 USDA staff. Again, this is at the end of last year. We don't have these fully updated staff numbers for the USDA. Already work in state and county level offices. And those folks have definitely not been spared from those deferred resignation programs and other separations. So, the intent of this like reorganization plan doesn't necessarily marry well with the impact of that reorganization plan. And briefly, what we're doing about all of this stuff in terms of the legislative space, we're really trying to continue to work with bipartisan group of champions and congressional allies on the Farm Bill process and the appropriations processes. We're continuing to really try and understand how these reconciliation and rescission packages will impact the political calculus moving forward. And then, I think I'd love to turn it over to Vinnie for a second just to give a quick story of how we're really doubling down on our role as a network weaver and connecting congressional offices with like researchers in their states and districts. Vinnie, if you're
Yep.
able to, great.
Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, so Gordon has hit on a lot of things that are troubling for people to hear about. And one thing that a lot of members of Congress think is, I hope this doesn't happen in my district. And so a lot of the things that we're trying to do is link organic researchers and stakeholders with their members of Congress, so they can kind of give a viewpoint of the work they're doing, particularly with organic research grants and funding. So one that was very successful was with Dr. Michael Mazurek from Cornell University. He actually developed the honey nut squash. I'm not sure if you ever see that in your grocery store, but he developed that. And he's in Claudia Tenney's office. I'm a district in upstate New York. And coincidentally, OFRF got him started on his whole research path. So we connected Michael and Claudia Tenney's office here in DC. And just Michael expressed how important this organic research funding is for his work, and what he's doing with this, the research funds and how it's helping New York farmers. So, kind of showing that picture to congressional offices, it gives them a real world example of like how this might impact their agricultural community, their district, and their constituents. So we've basically done uh, 18 personal meetings with congressional offices, and we've had basically over 260 folks reach out on basically on their own behalf to their members of Congress. So it's been quite a comprehensive effort. and one that has been very successful in terms of getting pressure onto USDA amongst for all these issues.
Excellent. Thanks, Vinnie. And I think that just like really goes to show the importance of bringing voices beyond our own to the congressional offices and just showing that this isn't just a niche issue, but like has massive impact for their districts. And I think one of the best pieces of information that we have is for every $1 that's invested into agricultural research, over $20 of economic activity is spurred. So really just trying to like give that context to offices across the country. But in terms of our administrative actions, the resignation programs pretty well just baked in at this point. Not much we can really do, but we are actively trying to comment on the reorganization efforts. We did submit those comments last week, and they're available on our website. If you check out our advocacy page, if you're interested, that window for commenting has been extended to the end of this month. So if you're interested in sending in an email or sending in a comment, please take a look at our comments as well as other allies in the space like National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition or the National Organic Coalition, which has some helpful information. As I referenced a little earlier, we're also utilizing those Federal Register comment periods, which is a formal process of notice and comment, which is administered by the federal government. And we submitted some comments actually earlier today about the application kit as it relates to the National Security Memo implementation and the importance for peer review in this grant making. And then outside of those formal processes, we're constantly trying to and successfully engaging with USDA leadership, both within the research agencies specifically, but also in general. Like this meeting we had with NRCS administrators to really like make sure bring that organic voice within NRCS, which is Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is the agency that implements those conservation programs that I mentioned earlier that saw an increase in their baseline budgets, just to really make sure that they understand what this funding means for organic farmers across the country, and also making sure that the administration of those programs is more applicable to organic operations, because historically it hasn't been super great to really put it bluntly. So, and I think one really important thing though is, and something that Vinnie hit on is, we're one voice, but we really aim to empower a chorus, right? We have that free communicating with legislators, email-based course. And through that, we can help facilitate a meeting with your legislative offices. We can assist you in drafting a letter to the editor in your local news outlets. We can, help you in a variety of different ways and get more active in this space, but also just give you some base level understanding and knowledge of how these systems work. I am an attorney and an adjunct professor for the Vermont Law School teaching their legislative law course. So this is something I really nerd out on, and everyone at OFRF is definitely aware that I nerd out on it and is probably tired of hearing about it now, but I'm always happy to do that. And also additionally, our newsletter is a great place to learn of advocacy opportunities like as they pop up. So please take a look at those. But now kind of in general, kind of to boil it all down, what the future really holds for organic. I think, leading off with the good, it's very clear that there's going to be a continued increase in consumer demand for organic from the marketplace. There's consistent and fast growth within the organic kind of sector. It's valued at over $70 billion annually now, and that's up from 68 billion 2 years ago. So that's like a significant growth trajectory. that not all sectors are really experiencing, especially as we continue to have this health-centered and kind of recognition that nutrition and food is an important facet for your health. And kind of on that, we're seeing some new non-traditional partnerships growing, both like within the organic movement, but also between the organic movement and other movements. Some folks might be familiar with the Make America Healthy Again kind of world. There's obviously some you know, hesitancy there in some aspects, but it's also an exciting new way to talk about these things, to reach some audiences and folks that might not have seen themselves in organic previously. And as kind of mentioned, those conservation programs, some of those have seen increased budgets, like both the conservation, but also the data analysis and market analysis and some of those other pieces. But I think one thing to really understand is that like the funding may be there, but just given the moving to the bad, given the uncertainty about administrative actions and administrative capacity for actually getting the money out the door through an efficient and robust, like authenticated way, that's still a big question. And we'll kind of see how that develops in the future. And I think, in terms of the ugly, this is going to be continuing for the foreseeable future. These administrative disruptions and kind of the legislative calculus changing is going to be a new norm for us over the next few years. And I think making sure that we can continue to have robust conversations with both sides of the aisle, and really make sure all individuals and all offices understand that organic is and never really was a coastal kind of hippie thing. Like this is just a smart business decision that's also treating the land with respect, and trying to grow ecological and economic prosperity simultaneously, not sacrificing one for the other. And I think really importantly is just the long-term impacts of what we're seeing at these research agencies. We have had discussions with some researchers that were investigating or in trying to develop more pest and disease resistant livestock. Their breeding herd went from around over 200 to less than 100 because of those funding cuts. And that means that that's going to set back that breeding program and that evaluation program like years, if not decades. So that's an impact that, again, is easy to make in the short term, but incredibly difficult to get back to. So we're just really trying to make sure that the decision makers that are in charge of these things understand those like long-term impacts before they rush into any decision. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I had today. You can take, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, here's a QR code to get through it. But yeah, that's all I had. And here's our contact information, but I would love to, I'm sorry I talked a lot, but we have about 5 minutes for questions.
Sure, and we have quite a few. So we'll get started. We'll get to as many as we can. The first question, it is heartening to see the expansion of funding for farmer-facing programs like EQIP and RCPP, apologies. Have you all seen demand for those programs increase in recent years with organic farmers? If so, what type of farmers and in what areas of the country?
Yeah, I mean, they're incredibly popular programs, especially EQIP, and EQIP adoption and contract rates are a little bit lower for organic farmers than conventional farmers across the country, but CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, actually has a higher rate of organic utilization than EQIP, and that's largely because EQIP is designed to help implement conservation practices and really start from a baseline, whereas CSP, uh, like you already have to meet a specific conservation threshold, and many organic farmers are doing that just by virtue of being an organic farm and having the organic systems plan. Um, but I would love to follow up with the person that asked that question with some more like detailed information that we have.
Great. Thank you, Gordon, and we can arrange that. In light of both the structural reorganization and funding cuts, how can organic stakeholders and research, production, investment, and policy build resilience through multi-level engagement?
I think right now the biggest thing is just making sure that you can contact and have conversations with decision makers and let them know the impacts that you're experiencing and you expect to experience if those disruptions or funding levels fall short. Because it's a lot of the time, these folks are looking at spreadsheets and are looking at numbers and don't necessarily have the context. And that's largely what Vinnie is doing, is helping supply that context, right? And make sure that folks understand what's happening.
Just one second. I think if you are a farm and you have stuff that's been pulled or any issue, it's very important to contact your member because they can help you out on an individual level as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Constituent services is a great thing to use.
Great, good answer. Next question. Has there been any interest from organic food companies to advocate for ongoing quality assurance related to organic labels?
Definitely. And I think there's like a new campaign that was, I think, released either this week or last week from the Organic Trade Association, which is just discussing about the simplicity of organic, right? Like the label means something, and that is a lot easier than trying to understand all of the variety of private labels out there. And especially as we see, the strengthening organic enforcement, the SOE rule fully come into implementation, we're going to see different impacts of that it takes time, right? And I think that's the biggest thing with organic, is that there's a significant lag because of that, just like implementation and slower processes because of that transition period and other things.
Thank you. Next question. What roles do private capital and impact investors play in scaling innovative organic practices where federal support may lag?
That's a great question.
Gordon, I can answer that.
Yeah, please, Vin.
There was actually a summit at the House of Representatives a couple weeks, like last month, with some ag funders for like agri-tech and stuff like that. Just because a lot of the stuff, the timelines are very long, they invest in things that can be a big catalyst for very expansive scaling up of agricultural industry. Kind of finding that sweet spot where you get the most bang for your buck is what they were chiming about.
Excellent. Thank you, Vinnie. And I think we have time for one or two more. What do you see as the most promising policy opportunities for organics in the next Farm Bill? And how could these shape the market in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the one that I'm most excited about is our Organic Science and Research Investment Act, which we partnered with Senator Fetterman and Senator Schiff to introduce. And that's just really, doing a significant investment into research programming and research delivery, and happy to provide as much information as people are willing to take on that.
Thank you, Gordon. Next question. Is acreage in organic still growing, or is it flat over the past couple of years?
It's definitely changed, and that's one of the like big things that Organic acreage, if you just are looking at the numbers, has seemingly decreased over the past 5 years, but that's largely how they count it, because they changed how they count rangeland for organic production. So that's like resulted in what looked like a steep drop of organic acreage. But in terms of the amount of organic operations that are in existence, they're still growing. Like there's still more demand, and there needs to be more organic operations across the country, especially when it comes to commodity production, because we import over 80% of our organic soy, we import about half of our organic corn, and that's a massive gap, right? That needs to be filled, and when we're importing those goods, that means we're also exporting the premium. And that isn't necessarily a good economic calculus for us as a nation.
Sure. And on that note, I think we'll have to end. We're just after the hour. But if anybody is interested in speaking further with Gordon or Vinnie, please reach out to OFRF. And if anybody has questions about Iroquois Valley, feel free to contact us at investors@iroquoisvalleyfarms.com.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Donna,
Thank you,
for inviting us.
everyone. Thank you,
Thank you so
guys.
much.
Thank you.